Chinese restaurants in West Africa, and of course Chinese almost villages coming up in Angola and elsewhere. But in terms of the political relationships that China is forging, it tries to stay very under the radar.
I still want to get some further sense of the texture of how these ideas develop on the ground, the experiences of meeting people and seeing things that are driving the ideas.
You have to take, for example, the Balkans, where people say Europe really blew it in the 1990s, and America had to come in and save the day and provide the intervention force and the peacekeepers, and America took the lead in recognizing Kosovo just last month. Where were the Europeans? When you travel through these areas, what you find is, because of geography, which is again a fundamental force in a book on geopolitics like this, their psychology is already gravitated very much towards Europe. You can blame Europe and say, oh, Bosnia is still broken, but go there and see that without the European buses and infrastructure that's being built, and the way in which the government is essentially set up by Europe, and how the EU has replaced NATO and the UN as the management force in the South Balkans and Kosovo. Europe, you can already feel that these countries have no choice but to become European, which they are becoming, and that extension of European influence is felt in subtle ways when you travel there, not when you sit and you blame Europe for not having recognized Kosovo as early as the US and so forth. So that feeling, and that's really what I try to capture in the book, is the feeling of becoming European in places the further and further east you go.
And is then, just coming back to the big idea for a moment, is the idea of empire useful in that context? Because a lot of people of 50 and more will have a very clear idea of what a colonial empire actually consists of, and what you're describing in terms of a subtle soft power projection by Europe or by China is not what they mean by empire.
Empire still exists, but empire has changed. It's a globalized world, and there's more tools in the imperial shed than there were before. To look at North Africa, the connections between the southern European countries and North African countries have never been so tight, not even in the colonial era, not even in the Roman Empire. Did you have multiple physical pipelines, oil and gas pipelines, channeling the resources of North African states to Europe and into the European energy sort of grid. 2/3 or more of North African trade and exports go to Europe. Almost all the investment there comes from Europe. There's a direct historical evolution at play here, and it is most certainly a variation of the notion of empire.
And yet it's a very ambivalent project, isn't it? I mean, if you went out on the street